I am Ethan and I am 28 years old. 14 years ago, my own parents threw me out into the freezing snow, choosing to believe the vicious, fabricated lies of my twin brother over my own tears. While I was begging on my knees, clinging to my father's legs, my mother looked down at me with pure disgust and said, "A violent bully like you doesn't deserve to live in her house." They humiliated me in front of the entire school, essentially stripping away my family, my college fund, and my dignity in one swift motion. But there is one thing they didn't know. The grandmother they despised took me in, and the so-called black sheep they discarded just became the CEO of the real estate media empire that currently holds the mortgage to their beloved crumbling house. And right now, after completely abandoning me, they're blowing up my phone begging for money. Before I tell you exactly what happened, hit that like button if you believe in karma, and don't forget to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now let's go back to where this nightmare began. The television studio was uncomfortably hot, the bright overhead lighting beating down on my shoulders as I sat opposite one of the most recognized financial anchors in the country. The leather chair squeaked slightly as I shifted my weight, projecting an air of total confidence that had taken me years to construct. The interview was the culmination of a massive week for my company. We were discussing my recent promotion to CEO of a combined digital marketing and commercial real estate firm, a merger that had shocked the industry. The anchor leaned forward, clearly intrigued by the narrative of a self-made man who had built a lucrative empire without a single cent of inheritance or family backing. He asked me about the current market, and I smoothly navigated the conversation toward our new portfolio. We discussed everything from the impact of high-profile corporate litigation to the nuances of property valuation. I spoke with absolute authority, knowing millions of people were watching this broadcast live. When the floor director finally held up the cutting motion, the anchor smiled warmly, shook my hand, and praised my insight. Walking off that set, the adrenaline pumping through my veins was intoxicating. Interns handed me bottled water. Producers thanked me for my time, and for a fleeting, beautiful moment, I felt untouchable. I pushed through the heavy double doors of the studio and walked out into the crisp evening air. The city lights blurred in the distance as I pulled my keys from my pocket and approached my Porsche 911 parked in the VIP lot. I slid into the driver's seat, the rich scent of leather grounding me. I pulled my phone out of my jacket pocket. It had been on silent for the past 4 hours, a necessary boundary I set for major press events. The screen illuminated the dark interior of the car. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I physically gasped. 6 missed calls, all from a contact I had not seen pop up on my screen in over a decade. The name simply read, Mom. I stared at the glowing letters, my thumb hovering entirely frozen over the glass. My initial panic thought was that someone had died after 14 years of absolute deafening silence. What else could possibly prompt my mother to dial my number? A sudden illness, a fatal car crash, a funeral. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to delete the notification, to block the number, to put the Porsche in drive, and return to the peaceful, heavily guarded life I had painstakingly built. But the wounded 14-year-old boy, still living deep inside my chest, took over. The boy who just wanted his mother to look at him with a fraction of the pride she reserved for his brother. I hit call back. She answered on the first ring, almost as if she had been sitting with the phone in her hand, waiting for it to light up. Ethan, oh my goodness, Ethan, is that you? Her voice sounded exactly the same. It was high-pitched, overly sweet, and coated in that fake, sugary veneer she always utilized when she was trying to impress the neighbors at our community meetings or church gatherings. It was the voice of a woman who cared more about appearances than the actual Humans living inside her home. It is me, I said, my voice tight and guarded, completely stripped of the warmth I normally offered to strangers. Is someone hurt? Why are you calling me? Hurt? Oh, no, honey. No, we are all just perfectly fine. Better than fine. Actually, your father and I were just watching the local news channel in the living room. We saw your interview. Oh, Ethan, we are just bursting with absolute pride. My little boy on television. You look so handsome in that suit. Your father is right here. He wants to say hello. There was a shuffling sound over the receiver. No apology, no acknowledgement of the 14 years of dead air. No mention of the fact that the last time they saw me, I was a sobbing child being thrown into a snowbank. Just a seamless transition into playing the role of the proud parents. Then my father's booming, authoritative voice came through the speaker. He did not ask how I was doing. He dove right in treating me like an employee. He was calling into his office. Ethan, proud of you, son. Listen, your mother and I were talking after we saw you on the screen. We are retired now, living on a fixed income, and things are getting tight. The old house is really falling apart. The roof needs fixing. The kitchen is completely outdated. And frankly, we have zero savings left. We saw how well you are doing with all that real estate stuff. We figured since you are making such a massive salary now, you could help us out with the renovation cost. After all, we are family. You shouldn't hesitate to share your success with your parents. I sat perfectly still in the driver's seat. The sheer unadulterated audacity of his words washed over me like a bucket of ice water. Families share my success. Are you joking? I asked, the anger finally bubbling up through the thick layer of shock, my grip on the steering wheel tightening until my knuckles turned white. Why are you asking me for money when you haven't spoken to me in 14 years? You threw me out on the street. You erased me from your lives. I don't owe you a single dime. I heard my father scoff, but my mother snatched the phone back immediately. Ethan, do not be so ungrateful, she scolded, her tone shifting instantly from sweet to venomous. We raised you. We gave you life. You have a duty to support us in our old age. It is the absolute least you can do after all the grief and the trauma you caused your brother. I hung up the phone. I did not say goodbye. I just ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. My hands were shaking so violently, I had to press them flat against my thighs. The grief I caused my brother. Julian, the golden child, the mastermind behind my complete destruction. Hearing his name brought the memories crashing back with a force that knocked the wind completely out of my lungs. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the headrest, and suddenly I was not a wealthy CEO anymore. I was a child. Again, trapped in a house where love was a currency I could never afford to earn. I thought the worst of my past was firmly buried beneath years of therapy and financial success. I was so incredibly wrong. Growing up in my household, my twin brother, Julian, and I were treated so differently. You would logically assume we were born to completely different families. From the moment we could form sentences, my parents had firmly decided the trajectory of our respective lives. Julian was the chosen one. He was the golden child destined for absolute greatness, Ivy League universities, and boundless celebrated success. I was the spare, the afterthought, the resident black sheep, and my primary crime. I was simply a normal, active kid. I liked playing Little League baseball, riding bikes until the street lights came on, and making friends with the neighborhood children. I was not interested in sitting quietly in my immaculate room, studying advanced calculus at age 10. My parents, however, viewed my extroverted nature as a severe, almost unforgivable character flaw. They constantly compared us, and the comparisons were mathematically designed to never be in my favor. If I got A beyond A history test, I was lazy and unmotivated. If Julian got a B on the exact same test, the teacher was incompetent and the test was unfairly hard. The favoritism was not just hidden behind closed doors. It was blatantly, proudly displayed in front of our entire extended family, especially during the holidays. Every Thanksgiving dinner was a masterclass in psychological humiliation. We would all gather around the massive mahogany dining table, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and tension. My Aunt Beatrice, my mother's older sister, and a woman who absolutely thrived on manufacturing drama, would always start the interrogation. Aunt Beatrice was a master manipulator, a woman who whispered poison into my mother's ear at every available opportunity. She had just gone through a highly publicized, nasty divorce, fighting over custody and a massive real estate settlement, and she seemed determined to project her misery onto me. I remember one specific Thanksgiving, right after we turned 12. Aunt Beatrice leaned over her plate of cranberry sauce, looked right at me, and sighed dramatically. "It is such a tragedy, Martha," Beatrice said to my mother, her voice projected loudly, enough for every aunt, uncle, and cousin at the table to hear clearly. Twins are so incredibly tricky. There is always one who absorbs all the light, the talent, the potential, and then there is the other one who just casts a dark shadow. You really need to protect Julian's energy. Ethan just seems to drain it right out of him. You should watch his college fund closely, Martha. Ethan will likely squander it. My mother nodded solemnly, treating Beatrix toxic garbage like undeniable gospel truth. I sat there staring blankly at my mashed potatoes, feeling my face burn with a deep, consuming shame. My father did not defend me. Julian simply smirked across the table. The disparity in our treatment reached its most painful, undeniable peak on our birthdays. Being twins, we obviously shared the exact same day, but you would never know it by looking at the celebrations my parents hosted. For our 14th birthday, my parents went all out. They rented out an entire premium arcade complex for Julian. They bought him a brand new top-of-the-line gaming console, invited 20 of his classmates, and ordered a massive custom cake from an expensive bakery with his name written in bold gold icing. My name was scribbled at the very bottom edge of the cake in tiny, almost eye-level letters, looking like a total afterthought. But here is the beautiful irony of that day. Julian, despite being paraded around like a royal prince at home, was incredibly socially awkward and genuinely unpleasant to be around. He was arrogant, entitled, and frankly mean to the kids at school. They did not like him. So when the day of the huge, expensive arcade party arrived, a grand total of 2 kids showed up for him. They ate his cake in awkward silence and left early. Meanwhile, my parents had explicitly told me I was not allowed to invite anyone to the arcade because it was Julian's special day. But my friends, knowing exactly how my family treated me, had pulled their meager allowances together. After the disastrous arcade party ended, my friends met me at the local public park. They bought me cheap ice cream from a truck, gave me hilarious handmade cards, and we spent hours laughing, playing basketball, and just being kids. It was the best birthday I had ever experienced. When Julian found out that I had a genuinely great time while his expensive catered party was a total flop, something dark and dangerous inside him finally snapped. The jealousy that had always simmered beneath his pristine surface boiled over into a consuming hatred. He resented that I could talk to people effortlessly. He hated that people genuinely liked me for who I was, and he decided that if he could not have friends, he would make absolutely sure I did not have any either. The retaliation started slowly, almost imperceptibly. Julian began lying. If he broke a valuable vase in the living room, he would tell my parents I threw a baseball in the house. If he stole a $20 bill from my mother's purse, he would carefully hide the empty wallet under my mattress, and my parents already primed by Aunt Beatrice to believe I was a delinquent destined for failure, swallowed his lies without a single question or investigation. They began punishing me fiercely for things I never did. They grounded me from baseball practice. They barred me from attending school dances or hanging out at the mall. It felt like walking on a floor covered in eggshells in my own home, holding my breath and waiting for the next baseless accusation to drop and shatter my peace. The breaking point arrived during our sophomore year of high school. I had downloaded Snapchat on my phone. Every single teenager in America had Snapchat. It was just how we communicated, how we shared jokes, how we existed socially. But my parents had strict draconian rules against social media. Julian, operating like a seasoned spy, snooped through my phone while I was in the shower. He took a screenshot of the app and ran straight to my father, presenting it like highly classified evidence of a major crime. My parents went completely unhinged. My father marched into my bedroom, his face purple with absolute rage. He did not ask for an explanation. He did not yell. He just started destroying my sanctuary. He ripped my posters off the walls, tearing the paper into shreds. He took my phone, the one I had bought with my own summer job money, and smashed it repeatedly against the sharp edge of my desk until the glass shattered into 100 pieces. Then he walked out to the garage, grabbed a power drill, and literally took my bedroom door off its hinges. You have absolutely no right to privacy in this house. My father spat at me, carrying the heavy wooden door down the hallway. You are a liar and a sneak. You will live completely exposed until you learn to behave like your brother. Julian stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching the entire violent scene unfold. When my father walked past him carrying the door, Julian looked right at me. A cold, deeply calculated smile spread across his face. He was testing the waters. He was realizing just how much absolute power he held over my parents and, by extension, over my entire existence. The emotional abuse escalated daily. After the door was removed, I dreaded going home. The only sliver of light in my dark life was my grandmother, Eleanor. She was my father's mother, a tough, fiercely independent woman who saw right through my parents' ridiculous facade. She refused to play their games. Whenever she visited, she would sneak me my favorite chocolate bars and slip a $20 bill into my pocket when no one was looking. Do not let them break your spirit, Ethan, she would whisper, fiercely, holding my face in her warm, wrinkled hands. You have a good heart. Your brother is sick with envy, and your parents are blind fools. But you are strong. You will survive them. I held on to her words like a life preserver in a raging ocean. But even Grandma Eleanor could not protect me from the catastrophic storm Julian was brewing at school. He realized that torturing me at home was no longer enough to satisfy his jealousy. He wanted to destroy my reputation outside those walls. He wanted to take away the only thing I had left in the world, my friends. I started noticing the subtle shift in the school hallways. Burst. People who usually high-fived me between classes suddenly kept their heads down. Invitations to hang out on the weekends completely stopped. Whispers followed me into the cafeteria, trailing behind me like a foul stench. I felt like I was slowly losing my mind, entirely isolated. In a building packed with hundreds of people, I finally cornered my best friend, Derek, by his locker after gym class. We had been inseparable since the second grade. I begged him to tell me what was going on, why everyone was looking at me like I was radioactive. Derek would not even look me in the eye. Just stay away from me, Ethan, Derek muttered, slamming his metal locker shut. With a loud bang, I know exactly what you were doing to Julian. He told us everything. He showed us the bruises You are a complete psycho. My blood ran cold. Bruises? What? Bruises? I thought the nightmare was contained firmly to the walls of my home. I was entirely unprepared for the sheer scale of the destruction my brother had unleashed upon my life. The accusation felt like a physical blow to the stomach, knocking the air straight out of my lungs. Derek walked away down the crowded corridor, leaving me completely paralyzed in front of the locker banks. My mind raced at a million miles an hour, desperately trying to piece together the terrifying fragments of this absurd puzzle. Bruises. Julian was claiming I beat him up. I spent the rest of that day in a state of absolute, suffocating panic. I skipped my afternoon classes and started watching Julian from a distance, hiding behind stairwells and cafeteria pillars. The next morning, I saw exactly what Derek was talking about. Julian walked into the school cafeteria. His head hung low in a perfect display of manufactured sorrow. He was wearing a short-sleeved polo shirt despite the chilly autumn weather. On his upper left arm was a massive dark purple bruise, the edges yellowing slightly. Later that week, he showed up to chemistry class with a swollen lower lip and a faint, unmistakable black eye. Whenever a teacher, a counselor, or a concerned student asked him what happened, he would flinch dramatically. He would put on a terrified, wide-eyed expression and whisper that he fell down the wooden stairs at home, or that he was just playing too rough to pick up football game. But he made absolutely sure to say it in a trembling tone that heavily implied he was terrified and covering for someone dangerous. He played the battered, terrified victim with the terrifying precision of a seasoned psychopath. He was doing this to himself. He was purposefully inflicting severe injuries on his own body. He was punching his own face, throwing his own body against hard surfaces, enduring physical pain just to carefully frame me. I confronted him that Friday afternoon in the empty school parking lot. I ran up behind him, grabbed him fiercely by the strap of his expensive backpack, and spun him around to face me. What are you doing? I demanded, my voice trembling violently with a mixture of profound fear and explosive rage. Julian, you need to tell them the truth. Right now. Stop doing this to yourself. Stop telling people I am hurting you. Julian did not look scared. He did not flinch. He looked around the empty asphalt to make absolutely sure no one was watching us. And then that same cold, deeply calculated smirk spread across his bruised, swollen face. Why would I ever do that? He whispered, stepping closer to me until I could smell the mint gum on his breath. Everyone loves a victim, Ethan, and everyone already firmly believes you are the bad guy at home. It is so incredibly easy to make them believe you are a violent monster here too. You deserve to rot alone just like I did on my birthday. He violently ripped his backpack from my grip, turned his back on me, and walked to my parents' waiting car, leaving me standing alone in the freezing wind. The rumor mill spun entirely out of control over the weekend. It was no longer just idle teenage gossip in the cafeteria. It was actively shaping how the entire community perceived me. Concerned parents were calling the school board. Teachers looked at me with open, unmasked disgust during lectures. I desperately wanted to tell my parents the truth, to beg them to intervene, but I knew with absolute heartbreaking certainty that they would side with Julian. They always did. The bomb finally detonated on a rainy Tuesday morning. A stern voice came over the classroom intercom, instructing me to report to Principal Higgins' office. Immediately, the walk down the long hallway felt like a march to the executioner's block. When I pushed open the heavy oak door to the office, my heart sank entirely into my shoes. My mother was already sitting in one of the leather guest chairs, dabbing her eyes dramatically with a crumpled tissue. My father stood firmly behind her, his posture rigid with fury, glaring at me like I was a stranger who had broken into his home. Julian sat in the far corner, shrinking into a chair, looking incredibly small and fragile, sporting a fresh, ugly red bruise on his cheekbone. Principal Higgins sat securely behind his massive mahogany desk, his hands folded, looking at me like I was a convicted felon. "Take a seat, Ethan," Higgins said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. The next hour was the most profoundly traumatizing experience of my entire life. Principal Higgins laid out the horrific accusations methodically. He stated that multiple students had come forward reporting that I was physically abusing my twin brother out of deep-seated jealousy over his academic success. He pointed directly to Julian's bruised face as undeniable proof. "Is this true, Julian?" Higgins asked gently, his tone softening entirely for my brother. "Did Ethan do this to you?" Julian let out a fake, trembling sob that echoed in the quiet room. He nodded, slowly, refusing to look in my direction. "Yes," he whispered, his voice cracking perfectly. "He hits me when Mom and Dad aren't home. He says it's because they love me more. I'm so scared of him, Principal Higgins. I can't sleep. Liar," I screamed, jumping out of my chair, unable to contain the absolute injustice of it all. "He is lying. He hits himself. He told me to my face he was doing it to ruin my life. Mom, Dad, you have to believe me. I have never laid a single finger on him." My father lunged forward instantly. He grabbed me violently by the shoulders and shoved me back into the chair with such force my teeth rattled against each other. "Do not you dare raise your voice to your mother, you absolute animal," he roared, spit flying from his lips. "We have suspected this dark behavior for months. The lying, the sneaking around, the aggression. You are completely out of control." My mother was sobbing hysterically now, reaching over to hold Julian's hand tightly. "We tried so hard with him, Principal Higgins. We gave him everything a child could want. I just don't understand where this inherent darkness comes from." I looked at the three of them. My family, the people who were biologically supposed to protect me, were actively acting as my judge, jury, and executioners based entirely on the word of a deeply disturbed, jealous teenager. "Principal Higgins, please," I begged, tears finally spilling over my cheeks, dropping onto my shirt. "Look at my disciplinary record. I do not have a single violent incident in 10 years. Check the security cameras. Ask Officer Davis, the school resource officer. He saw Julian trip on purpose last week. Please just do a real investigation." Higgins shook his head, his face a hardened mask of stern disapproval. "The school has a strict, unwavering zero tolerance policy for bullying and violence, Ethan, especially domestic violence that bleeds into our safe school environment. You are suspended for 10 days, effective immediately, and we will be evaluating your permanent enrollment status during that time." My parents did not say another word to me or the principal. My father grabbed me roughly by the back of my jacket, hauled me to my feet, and practically dragged me out of the office. He marched me through the crowded front lobby, past the staring faces of my former peers, and out to the car. The drive home was perfectly, terrifyingly silent. It was a suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. When we walked through the front door of our house, my father did not hesitate for a second. He marched straight up the hardwood stairs. I heard the loud sound of dresser drawers being ripped open. A few minutes later, he came back down, dragging a large black canvas suitcase behind him. He threw it down the stairs. It hit the foyer floor with a heavy, sickening thud, bursting open and spilling my jeans, shirts, and socks across the polished wood. "Get your things," my father said, his voice deadly calm, a stark contrast to his earlier yelling. "Dad, what are you doing?" I choked out, dropping to my knees on the floor to try and gather my scattered clothes. "You are no longer welcome in this house," he stated, staring down at me with eyes entirely devoid of any love, warmth, or recognition. I will not have a violent predator sleeping under the same roof as my wife and my son. You're going to pack this bag and you're going to get out. I started sobbing uncontrollably, the panic seizing my chest. I grabbed his pant leg, begging him, pleading with him, Dad, please. I am 14 years old. Where am I supposed to go? It is freezing outside. Mom, tell him, please. Mom, say something. My mother stood at the top of the stairs, her arms wrapped tightly, protectively around Julian. She looked down at me, her face contorted with disgust, and delivered the line that would vividly haunt my nightmares for the next decade. A violent bully like you doesn't deserve to live in her house. Call your grandmother. If she wants to deal with a delinquent, she can come get you, but as of right now, you are dead to us. My father grabbed me aggressively by the collar of my shirt, hauled me to my feet, and shoved me forcefully out the front door. He threw my broken suitcase out onto the porch after me. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, and I heard the loud, definitive click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I sat on the freezing concrete porch for 2 hours, the winter snow biting at my skin. I was shivering violently, clutching my flimsy jacket tightly around my chest. I used my battered, cracked cell phone to call Grandma Eleanor. I could barely speak through my hyperventilating sobs. She arrived 20 minutes later, her old Buick skidding dangerously into the snowy driveway. When she saw me sitting in the snow, surrounded by my clothes, she let out a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated fury. She did not hug me right away. She marched right past me, stomped up the porch steps, and began pounding on the front door with her fists like a battering ram. When my father opened the door, looking annoyed and arrogant, Grandma Eleanor unleashed hell. You pathetic excuse for a father, she screamed, pointing a shaking, furious finger directly in his face. You throw your own flesh and blood into the freezing snow based on the lies of a jealous boy. You blind, arrogant fool. Mother, keep your voice down. My father hissed, looking around nervously at the neighboring houses, terrified of a public scandal. You don't know what he did. He is violent. The only violence I see is the emotional butchery you and your idiotic wife have inflicted on this child for 14 years. She roared back, stepping closer to him. I am taking him, and hear me clearly, Arthur. If you ever try to contact him again, if you ever try to claim him on your taxes, or if you ever try to step foot near my property, I will file a massive lawsuit. I will call Child Protective Services and demand full custody. I will have you thrown in a jail cell for child abandonment. Do you understand me? My father looked entirely stunned. My mother cowered behind him in the hallway. Shadows. Grandma Eleanor did not wait for a response. She turned around, gathered my scattered things with gentle hands, and helped me into the warm passenger seat of her car. As we drove away, leaving behind the only home I had ever known, I looked back at the house. Through the rear view mirror, I saw Julian standing in the large living room window, watching me leave. The terrified victim act was gone. In its place was a look of cold, victorious satisfaction. He had won. He had completely destroyed me, or so he thought. The 10 days of my school suspension felt like an absolute eternity. Living with Grandma Eleanor was the single tether that kept me from entirely losing my mind to the grief. Her small, modest house smelled wonderfully of cinnamon, old paperbacks, and safety, a stark, beautiful contrast to the sterile, tense museum of a house I had grown up in. She made me hot, homemade meals, listened to me cry until my throat was raw and bleeding, and constantly reminded me that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds its way to the surface. But returning to high school after the suspension was lifted was exactly like walking straight into a lion's den. Wearing a suit made of raw meat, I was officially a complete outcast. The brand of violent abuser was permanently stamped onto my forehead, invisible to my own eyes, but glaringly obvious to everyone else in the building. The teachers treated me with cold, calculated suspicion, constantly monitoring my movements in the hallways. The students simply acted like I did not exist, a ghost haunting the lockers. I ate my lunch alone in the quietest corner of the library every single day. I walked the corridors with my head down, staring at the scuff marks on the linoleum. I had absolutely no friends, no social life, and no family outside of my grandmother. But in that crushing, overwhelming loneliness, a strange and powerful thing began to happen. The constant, exhausting noise of trying to please my unpleasable parents. The endless fatigue of trying to compete. With Julian, it all vanished. I had absolutely nothing left to lose, which meant I had all the time and focus in the world to dedicate entirely to myself. I threw myself violently into my studies. If they were going to universally label me a monster, I was going to be the smartest, most academically successful monster that school district had ever seen. I read voraciously. I studied until my eyes blurred. I graduated high school with top honors near the very top of my class. My parents did not attend the graduation ceremony. Julian was there, surrounded by his fake, sycophantic friends, glaring at me with deep resentment as I walked confidently across the stage to receive my diploma. I did not even look his way. He was already a ghost to me. College was my true ultimate escape. I moved 3 states away to a university where nobody knew my name. I utilized a complex mix of academic scholarships, grants, and federal student loans to pay my way. Since my parents had completely drained the college fund they had supposedly set up for me, giving every last penny to Julian, I logically assumed, for the first time in my entire life, I tasted absolute, unadulterated freedom. Nobody knew my face. Nobody knew the horrific rumors. I was just Ethan, during my sophomore year, looking to fulfill a humanities credit I took an elective creative writing class with Professor Henderson. He was a notoriously tough, non-nonsense academic who rarely handed out compliments. After reading my final term essay, a thinly veiled, deeply emotional narrative about surviving severe family trauma and the psychology of scapegoating, he called me into his cramped office. "You have a profound gift, Ethan, Professor," Henderson told me, tapping his pen against my graded paper. "You know exactly how to manipulate emotion through words. You understand narrative structure on an instinctual level. Do not waste this talent on writing academic essays for professors like me. Learn how to write for the real world. Learn copywriting. Learn digital marketing. That is where the power is." That single conversation permanently changed the trajectory of my life. I did not want to just be a struggling, starving writer. I wanted to be financially bulletproof. I wanted to build a fortress of wealth and influence, so incredibly strong that nobody could ever throw me out into the cold again. I started a freelance writing business. From my tiny, cramped dorm room, I wrote blog posts, e-commerce product descriptions, and persuasive ad copy. I worked relentlessly until 3 a.m. every single night, surviving on cheap ramen noodles and terrible instant coffee. Slowly but surely, my client base grew. I started charging higher rates. By the time I walked across the stage to graduate college, I did not need to desperately look for a corporate entry-level job. I had already built a highly profitable digital marketing agency. Over the next few years, I leaned heavily into the lucrative real estate sector. I realized quickly that commercial real estate agents and massive property developers desperately needed compelling, emotional narratives to sell their multi-million-dollar listings. I combined my raw storytelling skills with aggressive data-driven digital marketing tactics. My agency exploded in revenue. I started hiring staff, expanding into high-end media, production, and eventually taking the massive leap to invest heavily in the very real estate projects we were successfully marketing. I was completely, undeniably, financially independent. I bought Grandma Eleanor a beautiful, fully accessible cottage with a sprawling botanical garden, paying for it entirely in cash. I traveled the world as a wealthy digital nomad, closing massive deals from coffee shops in Rome and high-rises in Tokyo. I was actively healing. The childhood scars were still there, but they no longer dictated my future. And then 5 years ago, the universe delivered a strange, unexpected piece of closure. I was sitting in a high-end coffee shop in downtown Chicago, preparing for a meeting with a new client, when a woman cautiously approached my table. She looked familiar, but it took me a moment to place her. It was Chloe. She had dated Julian briefly during our senior year of high school. She looked incredibly nervous, wringing her hands together. Ethan, I don't know if you remember me. I remember you, Chloe, I said, calmly, gesturing for her to sit. She sat down, genuine tears instantly welling up in her eyes. I need to apologize to you. It has been eating me alive for years. I have been holding on to this secret, and I can't do it anymore. Back in high school, when Julian was showing everyone those horrible bruises, I went over to your house one day after school to surprise him. The front door was unlocked. I walked quietly up the stairs to his bedroom, and the door was cracked open. My breath hitched in my throat. I stayed perfectly still, maintaining eye contact. I saw him, Ethan, Chloe whispered, her voice breaking with guilt. I saw Julian standing in front of his full-length mirror. He had a heavy, hardback history textbook in his hand, and he was violently slamming it into his own shoulder over and over again. He was doing it to himself. I was so terrified of what he was doing, I just backed away and ran out of the house. I never told anyone because I was genuinely scared of what a psychopath like that would do to me if I exposed him. I am so incredibly sorry I let everyone think you were the bad guy. Hearing that verbal validation, after all those long, agonizing years, felt like a heavy steel chain snapping off my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly, her sincerely, for finally telling me the truth, paid for her coffee, and walked away. I didn't need to run back and expose Julian anymore. I didn't need my parents' validation or their apologies. I had my own incredible life. My business continued to skyrocket. Over the next 5 years, we executed a massive, highly publicized corporate merger, and my agency seamlessly transitioned into a full-scale commercial real estate investment and media conglomerate. My net worth climbed rapidly into numbers I used to think were entirely fictional, and that undeniable success led directly to the television interview, the very interview that my parents happened to watch from their living room, standing on the cold sidewalk next to my Porsche, holding my phone after hanging up on my mother's demands for a salary handout. The pieces began to click rapidly into place. They wanted money. They thought I was just some successful freelancer with a decent salary. They thought they could guilt trip me into writing a fat check for their home renovations. They had absolutely no idea the terrifying level of financial power I now wielded. They had no idea that my investment firm had recently purchased a massive multi-million-dollar portfolio of distressed residential debt from a struggling regional bank. I opened my phone, bypassed the security protocols, logged into my secure company server, and searched the database for the exact address of my childhood home, the house they had kicked me out of. When the legal file loaded on my screen, a slow, incredibly dark smile spread across my face. Julian, the brilliant golden boy, had apparently tried his hand at a tech business and failed miserably. To cover His massive losses and avoid a lawsuit he had convinced my parents to take out. A massive second mortgage on their house. To fund his sinking ship, the house was heavily in default. It was slated for immediate foreclosure, and my company, as of 2 short weeks ago, was the legal entity that owned every single cent of that debt. I thought the storm of my past had finally passed, but looking at that binding legal document, I realized something profound. I was not going to hide from the storm anymore. I was going to become the hurricane. The grand ballroom of the downtown Ritz-Carlton was practically humming with the quiet, expensive energy of corporate triumph. My firm was hosting our annual charity gala, a massive event that doubled as a victory lap for our latest highly aggressive real estate acquisition. The room was bathed in warm amber light, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers and the rim of champagne flutes. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the valet line bustling with activity, carefully parking a steady stream of Ferraris, sleek Lamborghinis, and heavy, imposing Rolls-Royces. I stood near the center of the room, dressed in a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, holding a glass of sparkling water. I was currently deep in conversation with Marcus, a 70-year-old billionaire property developer who had become my most trusted business partner, and in many ways the father figure I never actually had. We were discussing the intricate details of a massive commercial zoning project when my head of security, a towering former Marine named David, quietly approached my side. He leaned in, his